Welcome back to Earthly Delights, my fellow garden wanderers and earth lovers. Have you ever stood beneath a tall, healthy fruit tree in your own yard and felt that quiet disappointment settle in? You have watered it, fed it, protected it, and given it good soil, steady sunlight, and all the care a gardener can offer. The tree looks beautiful, full of green leaves, strong branches, and vigorous growth. But there is one problem that hurts more than anything else. Year after year, it gives you no fruit. If that sounds familiar, take a deep breath and listen carefully. You have not failed. You do not have a black thumb, and your tree is not useless or broken. In many years of working with gardens, farms, soil, and fruit trees, I have learned that nature rarely responds to force. It responds to signals. A tree is not just standing there doing nothing. It is constantly reading its environment: water, nutrients, sunlight, stress, branch position, root pressure, and making decisions based on what those signals tell it. Today, we are going to learn how to understand that language. I'll walk you through the hidden physiology behind fruiting, the old orchard wisdom passed down through generations, and the practical methods that modern growers still use to guide a stubborn tree back into production. We'll look at how a little controlled stress, a simple change in branch angle, and a few common household ingredients can help shift a leafy, unproductive tree into one that is ready to bloom, set fruit, and carry a real harvest. By the end of this video, you may look at your fruit tree differently. And maybe, in some small way, you'll look at the difficult seasons in your own life differently too. So settle in, take your time, and let's step into the fascinating world where soil, sunlight, stress, and patience come together to create fruit. Section 1. The Comfort Trap: Vegetative versus Reproductive Growth. To understand why a fruit tree refuses to bear, we first have to ask a very simple question. What is that tree trying to do with its energy? From years of working with gardens, orchards, soil, and young trees, I can tell you that a fruit tree usually spends its strength in two main directions. The first is vegetative growth. That means it pushes out new shoots, stretches taller, builds branches, and produces plenty of green leaves. The second is reproductive growth. That is when the tree begins forming flower buds, blossoms, fruit, and eventually seeds to continue its life cycle. But here is the important point. A tree cannot give its full energy to both jobs at the same time. At some stage, it has to lean more toward one side. Think of it like someone living with every comfort available: good food, a soft bed, no pressure, and no real reason to change. Why would they rush to take on responsibility? They would probably keep enjoying the easy life. A fruit tree can behave in a very similar way. When it receives too much nitrogen, especially from rich lawn fertilizer nearby, it feels like conditions are perfect for endless leafy growth. So instead of making flowers and fruit, it keeps making leaves. That is why our goal is not to punish the tree, but to gently change the message it is receiving. We want to tell it, in a biological language it understands, that the season of non-stop leafy growth needs to slow down, and now it is time to focus on fruit, seed, and legacy. Section 2. The Rusty Nail Myth and the Power of Wound Ethylene. For generations, many old homesteaders believed in a strange trick for stubborn fruit trees. They said that if a tree would not bear, you could drive a rusty nail into the trunk, and the next season, it would suddenly load itself with fruit. Others talked about drilling through a branch and running wire through it. So the real question is this: was there any truth behind that old method, and was the rusty nail feeding iron into the tree? The answer is more interesting than the myth. A tree does not absorb iron from a solid piece of metal stuck in its wood. That part is not the real reason anything happens, but the wound itself can trigger a genuine biological response. When a branch or trunk is injured, the tree releases a stress hormone called ethylene, especially what growers often refer to as wound ethylene. Ethylene works like an internal alarm. When the tree senses damage, it reads that stress as a possible threat to survival. And when a living plant feels threatened, one of its natural responses is to push harder toward reproduction, so its genetics can continue. That hormone shift can encourage the tree to move toward flowering. But before anyone reaches for a hammer, this is where experience matters. Driving a nail into a fruit tree is risky. It creates an uncontrolled wound, and that open injury can invite rot, fungal decay, boring insects, and long-term weakness. We are not trying to torture a tree into production. We are trying to guide it with skill. So instead of using dangerous damage, we need safer, more controlled ways to send a similar signal without shortening the life of the tree. Section 3. The art of festooning, bending the rules. If there is one method I would want every fruit grower to understand, it is this one: branch bending, also called festooning. It is gentle, practical, and one of the safest ways to encourage a stubborn tree to form fruiting wood. Go outside and study the way your branches are growing. Are many of them shooting straight upward, almost like soldiers standing at attention? If they are, that may be one of the reasons your tree is giving you leaves instead of fruit. At the tip of an upright branch, the tree produces a growth hormone called auxin. Because of gravity and the branch's position, that auxin moves down through the vertical shoot. As it moves, it suppresses the side buds below, almost like a strict manager saying, "Stay quiet. Do not bloom yet. We are still growing upward." This is what botanists call apical dominance. But when we change the branch angle, we change the message inside the tree. By using soft twine, small weights, or gentle tying, you can lower a flexible branch to about a 45 to 60 degree angle, closer to horizontal. That simple shift disrupts the strong downward flow of auxin. Once that dominance weakens, the side buds begin to wake up. Other growth signals, including cytokinin rising from the roots, can now influence those buds and encourage them to become flower buds instead of staying dormant. The beauty of this method is that you have not cut the branch, wounded the tree, or forced it harshly. You have simply changed its posture and allowed its own chemistry to move in a new direction. Just use soft ties, avoid cutting into the bark, and never pull the branch so far downward that it points to the ground. If you overdo it, the tree may respond by sending up a flush of useless vertical water sprouts. A smooth, gentle arch is enough. Done correctly, this one adjustment can turn a leafy branch into a future fruiting branch. Section 4. The phloem elevator, scoring and girdling. Sometimes an older fruit tree that has been stubborn for years needs a firmer signal than branch bending. That is where scoring and girdling come in. Two techniques that experienced orchard growers have used for a very long time to encourage flowering and fruiting. But before we go any further, remember this rule clearly. Never do this on the main trunk of your tree. If you interrupt the flow around the trunk, you can weaken the entire tree or even kill it. This method is only for selected secondary branches, and it must be done carefully. Just under the rough outer bark of a branch is a thin living layer called the phloem. You can think of the phloem as a downward-moving elevator. The leaves capture sunlight and turn it into sugary carbohydrates. Then the phloem carries that energy downward to feed the roots. When you make a very shallow cut with a clean, sharp knife, or remove only a tiny ring of bark about 1/8 of an inch wide, you temporarily slow that downward elevator. The sugars cannot move down as easily, so they begin to collect in the upper part of that branch. And when a branch suddenly has extra stored energy sitting in its canopy, it often responds by forming more flower buds and setting more fruit. If using a knife makes you uncomfortable, there is also the wire wrap method. Take a piece of soft wire and wrap it around a branch snugly, not tight enough to cut deeply, but firm enough to create gentle pressure as the branch grows. Over the season, that mild squeeze slows the movement of carbohydrates and sends a controlled reproductive signal to the branch. Once the tree has responded and flowering begins, the wire must be removed so the branch can heal properly. This is not about damaging the tree. It is about using temporary, controlled stress with care and timing. Section 5. The underground wake-up call, root pruning. Now, what if the real problem is not in the branches but underground? That brings us to root pruning, a method that works from the opposite end of the tree. Earlier, we talked about a tree living too comfortably, taking in plenty of water and nitrogen, and using all that abundance to keep producing leaves. The roots are the engines that support that luxury. When those roots are feeding the tree too strongly, the top of the tree may keep growing with no urgency to flower. In early spring, you can take a sharp garden spade and make several deep cuts in the soil around the drip line of a vigorous tree. This slices through some of the outer feeder roots, not to destroy the tree, but to reduce its intake just enough to send a message. By slightly limiting the tree's access to water and nitrogen, you create a mild, localized stress. That stress can encourage the production of abscisic acid, often called ABA, a plant hormone that helps slow down wild vegetative growth. Once the tree stops pushing so much energy into new shoots and leaves, it has a better chance to redirect its strength toward flower cluster formation. There is a lesson here that goes beyond gardening. Sometimes, when life becomes too comfortable and too rooted in routine, growth loses direction. A small disruption can help energy move towards something more meaningful. But with trees, this method must be used carefully. Do not dig up the tree. Do not cut too close to the trunk, and do not use it on weak or stressed trees. Save root pruning for very vigorous, leafy trees that clearly need a stronger push toward fruiting. Section 6. Chasing the sun. The secret of summer. Pruning now. Let's talk about one of the most common mistakes I see gardeners make. When a fruit tree refuses to bear, the first instinct is often to wait until winter, grab a saw, and cut it back hard. But heavy winter pruning can do the opposite of what you want. When the tree is dormant, the root system remains strong and full of stored energy. Then spring arrives and all that stored energy rushes upward into the remaining branches. Instead of fruit, you get a powerful flush of new shoots and leaves. You were hoping for a harvest, but the tree gives you a giant green salad. If the goal is fruit, summer pruning is often much more useful. Summer pruning helps calm aggressive growth because you are removing some leafy energy while the tree is actively growing. More importantly, it opens the canopy and lets sunlight reach the inner branches. Fruit buds need light. If the center of your tree is dark, crowded, and tangled, many of those inner buds will stay weak or unproductive. By thinning crowded branches, removing crossing growth, and opening small windows in the canopy during summer, you allow sunlight to reach the wood where future fruit buds can form. This is one of the simplest truths in orchard care. Light creates fruiting potential. When the inside of the tree receives air and sun, the tree becomes healthier, calmer, and more productive. Where you let the light in, the fruit has a place to begin. Section 7. Brewing liquid gold, wood ash, molasses, and cinnamon. We have shaped the branches, checked the roots, and opened the canopy so sunlight can reach the wood. Now we come to something every serious grower eventually learns. If you want healthier fruit, you must pay attention to the soil. I do not look at fertilizing as simply feeding the tree. I look at it as feeding the living system around the roots. When the soil is active, balanced, and full of microbial life, the tree can take up what it needs far more efficiently. And if your goal is fruit, one of the first things to understand is this. Too much nitrogen will keep pushing leaves. Nitrogen is wonderful when a tree is young and needs to build structure. But when you want flowers and fruit, the tree needs stronger support from potassium and calcium. Potassium helps drive flowering, fruit development, and strong stems. Calcium helps build firmness and structure in the plant tissue. That is why this simple homemade mixture can be so useful when used with care. Let's call it liquid gold. First, we start with wood ash, especially ash from clean hardwood. Wood ash contains potassium, calcium carbonate, phosphorus, and trace minerals, while bringing almost no nitrogen. That makes it very different from the rich green fertilizers that push leafy growth. Used lightly, it can help support the kind of mineral balance a fruiting tree needs. Next, we add unsulfured blackstrap molasses. Molasses is more than just sugar. It contains small amounts of minerals like iron and magnesium, along with compounds that soil organisms can use as food. The tree itself is not drinking sugar like a person would, but the beneficial microbes in the soil respond to that carbon source. When microbial activity increases, those organisms help process organic matter and minerals, making nutrients more available around the root zone. Finally, we add ground cinnamon. Cinnamon contains natural aromatic compounds, including cinnamaldehyde, and many gardeners use it as a gentle natural support in soil care. In this mixture, it adds another layer to the brew, helping create a cleaner, more balanced environment around the roots. Mix 1 tablespoon of wood ash, 1 tablespoon of unsulfured blackstrap molasses, and 1 tablespoon of ground cinnamon into 1 gallon of unchlorinated water. Let it steep for 24 hours. Then pour it slowly around the base of the tree, where the feeder roots can benefit from it. You are not forcing the tree. You are giving the soil a mineral-rich, microbe-friendly boost at the right time, so the tree has better support for flowering, fruiting, and steady growth. Section 8. Ancient Alchemy. Water-soluble calcium, WCA. For the final method, we turn to a practice many natural growers respect deeply: Korean natural farming, often called KNF. The heart of this approach is simple. Instead of fighting nature, we learn how to work with natural chemistry in a way plants can actually use. Calcium is one of the most important building materials inside a plant. It strengthens cell walls, supports firm fruit, and helps blossoms hold better under stress. When calcium is lacking or unavailable, fruit quality can suffer, blossoms may drop, and problems like blossom end rot can appear in certain crops. But if you simply throw raw eggshells into the garden, they do not break down quickly. They are slow, hard, and can take a long time before the calcium becomes available. That is why growers make water-soluble calcium, or WCA. Start with leftover eggshells and remove the inner membrane as much as you can. Crush the shells, then gently roast them over low heat for about 45 minutes until they turn a light golden tan. This step helps dry them and burn off organic material that could otherwise rot in the mixture. Next, place the roasted shells into a glass jar and add brown rice vinegar at a ratio of 1 part eggshells to 10 parts vinegar. Very quickly, you will see bubbling. That reaction comes from the acid in the vinegar meeting the calcium carbonate in the shells. The process helps convert the calcium into a form that is much easier for plants to use. Cover the jar with a breathable cloth and place it in a cool, dark spot for 7 to 10 days, or until the bubbling has stopped. Then strain the liquid, and you have a concentrated natural calcium solution. To use it, dilute 1 milliliter of this liquid into 1 liter of water, then apply it as a fine spray to the leaves at dusk. At that time of day, the plant is under less heat stress, and the leaves can receive the solution more gently. This calcium support helps strengthen plant tissue, improve fruit quality, and give blossoms a better chance to develop into a strong harvest. It is simple, low cost, and beautifully connected to the rhythm of natural growing. The philosophy of the harvest. When many of us first begin gardening, we think the answer to a barren tree is force. Water more, fertilize more, cut harder. Push the tree until it finally gives us what we want. Some people even reach for old tricks like hammering a nail into the trunk, hoping shock will create fruit. But after years of working with trees, soil, and seasons, I can tell you this: a fruit tree does not truly thrive through force. It responds to understanding. It responds when we read its signals correctly and guide it with patience. Sometimes the answer is a gentle change in branch angle, letting a vertical shoot become a fruiting branch. Sometimes it is opening the canopy so sunlight can reach the wood. Sometimes it is checking the roots, reducing excess vigor, or feeding the soil with the minerals the tree actually needs, not just the fertilizer that makes leaves look greener. We do not control fruit trees as much as we collaborate with them. The real question is not, how do I force this tree to give me fruit? The better question is, what is this tree telling me, and what does it need to express its full potential? Take these lessons into your garden with patience. Bend a branch carefully. Let the light in. Support the soil. Use controlled stress only when the tree is strong enough to handle it. Observe before you act, and act with purpose. When you begin to work with the tree instead of against it, the harvest becomes more than just fruit. It becomes a relationship with the land. Thank you for spending this time with me today. If this helped you see your garden in a new way, give the video a thumbs up so more earth lovers can find it. Leave a comment and tell me where in the world you are gardening from and which method you want to try first. I always enjoy hearing your stories from the soil. Until next time, keep your hands in the dirt, keep your face toward the sun, and remember this: it is never too late for a tree, a garden, or even a life to become fruitful again. God bless, and happy gardening.